Speaking with Linda was such a great joy. Although a busy psychiatrist, she carved out time to write a children's book and complete the Land of the Sun trilogy, a fantasy series that demonstrates world building at its finest. When she isn't seeing patients, Linda is also the editor of her medical association's publication and has worked on an illustrated anthology that honors frontline healthcare workers and their experiences during the pandemic. We pondered the business of ghostwriting, discussed the importance of nurturing the love of writing in children, and recognized the value of learning from criticism. Thank you, Linda, for sharing your story on the Indie Author podcast. Now let's get to it. Hi, welcome to Indie Authors. Today we have Linda Ling. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good.
Good. And you are actually coming to us all the way from Singapore, so that you're my first international. I mean, I've done interviews, conversations with people from my neighbor, the States, but you are our first overseas guest. So
Yay.
there'll be some celebratory effect that happens. And as I always do, I like to start with the bio, your bio, not mine, and also the list of your books. Okay, so here we go. So you are a full-time psychiatrist and a mom of four. Your husband works part-time and is a stay-at-home dad full-time. So that's very, very helpful, actually. Writing is your way of staying sane amidst a very hectic life. You're also an acquisitions editor for a local newsletter for doctors, and your eldest daughter is a fellow writer too. So exciting. And we will talk about that because I love that. And you have a series out, one of which I started. Book one I've started. So you've got the Land of the Sun trilogy. Book one is Sundred, book two is Forged, and book three is Renewed. And you also have an adorable children's book out called Adventures of Tree Fairy. Yeah?
Yep.
Excellent. Yep. So did you want to give like sort of a synopsis of the series?
Okay, let me try. Basically, it's about a princess and her shenanigans and all the things that she catalyzes along the way. But even though book one focuses a lot on her, because that's what kickstarts everything, the overarching theme becomes more about finding yourself, figuring out who you are amidst change, and of course there's a villain to defeat. And
yeah, you always need a good villain.
yeah. So that's a very crunched down version of what all three books are about. So immediately when I started reading the first one, so Sundred, I got such a strong Lord of the Rings. Yes, Lord of the Rings. That's Frodo. Why am I having a mental block on that? Lord of the Rings feel / a little bit of Game of Thrones, just because of the geographic description of I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a very interesting, and I loved how you did that actually right in the beginning. You like told the tale and then went on to it was what it was. And so anyway, because I don't want to give away too much, but right away you're immersed in this wonderful world. And I was so excited to start it. Of course, like I say with every guest, because there's so much reading involved, I have this huge to finish, not to start, because I started them all, but to finish list. And I wasn't able to finish the first book, but I was so enthralled with the main character, and just the whole setting and world that it's in. And I don't know, it's just, I can tell I'm going to be like all over it. So Thank you.
You're welcome. But you actually were inspired by another character, right? It kind of sparked or got your brain going. So you want to share that with us?
Yeah, so along the way, this princess meets a bunch of different other characters, and one of them is a query. You're not sure whether he is villainous, but he's definitely up to something. And that character, I pulled inspiration from Loki from the Marvels movies, and everyone knows how Tom Hiddleston plays Loki and how good he has been with it. So when I started writing that particular character, his name is Thane, Thane. I pretty much just put an image of Tom Hiddleston's Loki in my head and tried to capture the mannerism. Now, the way Thane ends up being by the end of it may not be exactly the same as Loki because they're not the same person. But that's just how I wanted to start him off.
And Loki is an incredibly complex character already, like even from like the Norse mythology and then how they created him in the Marvel world or the Avengers movies. And I would think from sort of like a psychological point of view too, that there's a lot going on with him, right? Because
yeah, no, so my character is not that complex. Well, yeah, okay, he might be, but yeah, I haven't talked to him lately.
And I love that you're like me, like you talk about the characters and you talk with the characters. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you should hear what I say about my other set of characters. I can get to that later if you want to ask me. So that's the psychiatrist part of me talking. But yeah, so I haven't really talked to Thane lately, but they in my head, they just started out the same, that mannerism that you never know what I'm quite up to. That's because he's really up to something, and that really builds up in book 2. I had a reader recently read my second book, and she didn't quite like where I took things, which was a bit of a blow for me. But on the other hand, she also did say that there were some vibes there that she wasn't expecting, and I know she was talking about this character.
That's so great to hear. Like, I mean, not that she wasn't happy with it, but just that like you were able to sort of create something that was unexpected, right? Because so many stories like go on a typical trajectory. And so to have that little bit of feedback where it's like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening here? I always love to be sort of pushed off my kilter in a book. I always find it so fascinating because I'm like, haha, I was wrong. So it's exciting. So you started off, you went to UC Berkeley and where you were exposed to liberal arts, and you completed novels there. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you're a college student and you're just trying to find yourself, right? So part of finding myself was finishing some novels, which I know were not that great. But then even though they were not that great, I still tried to query. And back then, when you query, you print out your first, whatever. And I still remember sending packages of letters and query letters that just never got any response. So that was it. That was all I did.
Do you think that there's like, you still have the manuscripts, right? Or the file somewhere?
Oh, no? I know, but the original manuscripts that I tried to send out then, when I look at them, I'm like, oh, that's so crappy. And actually I've done like three rewrites, drafts since then, and I feel it's so much better. I'm almost embarrassed by what I said. I'm like, if I were an agent, I wouldn't take this because it's crap.
I was going to ask, like, if there's an opportunity for them to be reworked, right? So I'm glad that you've gone back to them. But it's also sort of nice to have that as a milestone, so you can see where you came from and then be like, oh, yeah, I've progressed a lot. So, excuse me. So then after med school and kids, well, during which writing got totally shoved on the side because you were starting your career and having your children. And then the idea came to you about 10 years ago. And you had a stall in the process, correct?
Yeah.
And so how did you get yourself out of that?
So, yeah, this was about maybe 10, 11 years ago when I started writing Sunder. And then I got about 60% through and I got stuck. I had no idea where things were going. And then, life just got in the way. So I just left it. Periodically in the past 10 years or so, the world would call back to me, and I don't know if you know what I mean. Like there's this like hearkening feeling, especially when I happen to read another story, and there's an image that comes to my mind, and it's like, oh man, I wish I could finish it. But then I would try, and it didn't really work. So then what happened was a couple of years ago during the past the worst of the pandemic, but when things were still pretty bad, was when I was talking to my children and telling them stories. They were really bored, and that's when I started telling them three fairy stories. and eventually wrote it down in a little book. But at the same time, I had this story, the what I completed on Sunday, and I told it to them. Of course, I simplified it, and when I got to where I was stuck, that's when I said, "I'm done, children. No more. I don't know what happened." Children, and they were like, "What? What about the princess? What about the other guy, the fairy thing like that?" And I'm like, I don't know what happened. And that's when my eldest came along. Yeah. So by then she had already gone through this writing program in school. She was in the equivalent of grade 4 at the time. And she had completed a tiny little like novel, not quite novella, a little thing. And so she had writing experience. And she listened to what I had written. She actually looked at it and she said, "Why don't you do this, 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 this?" And that just broke this literal dam, and everything's come gushing out since
That's amazing. Then. That's amazing.
Yeah. I really have her to thank for that.
And so she also continued to write, right? Like she's still actively writing, isn't she?
She still is. She does fan fiction. She doesn't really like the idea of coming out with original material. I think she's probably not quite there yet. Number one. Number two, she is in the school drama club and she wrote her first script this year.
That's amazing. That's so great.
Grade 7.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Because there's another person that I'm going to have on the show who was part of a children's writing program. And that really fostered her love for creativity and for creating worlds and things like that. And I believe there was another person who had a play produced as a young person. And I think it's just so great to have those experiences when you're young and to be nurtured in that way, because it's such a wonderful thing and you don't want to take it away from a kid, right? You want them to always tap into that creativity, because even if they don't end up necessarily being a writer, and you probably know more about the brain than I do, but I would think that it would create this ability to think outside the box and to apply creative solutions to problems. And so I think it goes a little bit beyond just, oh yeah, you're a creative writer. Like I honestly think people can see things differently and probably analyze things from a different perspective. And that's a very valuable trait to have, especially as someone ages, right? And she's already so far ahead of so many others who haven't necessarily found their creativity.
And the thing is, I don't know. I don't know where I really nurtured this for her. It wasn't a deliberate thing. And then this whole like writing the script, I mean, she didn't really like promote that she could write or anything. The school just said, okay, among all the drama club members, you write the script. The other person writes one script, you write the other one. Okay, all right, go. She's like,
really?
Okay.
And then that was it. Well, they must have recognized something, I hope.
Yeah.
I imagine a poor kid who's like, I don't know what to come up with, like the stress they'd be under.
The funny thing was her first script was rejected for being too anti-authority.
Oh, so she's already a bit of a rebel. Okay. I
was like, the principal, the vice principal, they're like, no, this can't go.
We're going to have a rebellion on our
I'm a little bit concerned about that.
But a ton of great writers, are like, they like to push the envelope and really explore those big themes in their writing. So maybe she's going to be the next, I don't know. I'm not very familiar with Ayn Rand.
Anne Rice?
And nope. Oh, now I'm going to have to look the name up. I am the worst host all the time because I have absolutely no memory for people's names. Ayn Rand. There we go. Okay. That's who I was trying to say. Yeah. Yeah, she was a Russian-born American writer and philosopher. Yeah, for developing philosophical system. Okay, yeah. So she pushed and then the greats like Gertrude Stein, who was another sort of like trying to explore the world in a different way. So maybe you have one of these great minds. You never know. So the first book, not the Tree Fairies, right? The Tree Fairy book, because that. You pretty much like wrote it while you were telling your kids. It is in a sense, correct? Like you were making up the stories and then, but the first in the trilogy took you about a year to complete. Is that right? Oh no, like once you started back at it?
Once I started, I finished all 3 within a year, actually.
Whoa. I had one. Okay, all 3 in a year. That's awesome. That's incredible. And
Yeah.
you work full time.
Yeah, but well, like I said, I have
Oh
a
yeah.
part-time working husband who
Yeah.
is very supportive, has realized that, has recognized that I spent the past 10 years, being pregnant, giving birth, changing diapers, breastfeeding, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And,
All the things.
yeah, and is doing his part. Yeah. So it's a good arrangement.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, it's so I've talked to others about how important it is to have support. Even not everybody is so lucky to have spousal support, but if you're in a marriage and you have that spousal support, or a partnership of any sort, that it's so important and so lovely to
Yeah.
feel that they've got your back.
Yeah.
And now you and your daughter partner up to bounce ideas back and forth off of each other. So you're sort of like creative compadres.
Not all the time, but yeah.
Yeah, but see, that's another lovely experience to have with your, and I I think I told you that I often bounce stuff off my mom too, right? We'll be in the
Oh, no,
car.
you didn't mention
Oh, I
that.
didn't. Yeah, we'll be in the car going somewhere and I'm like, "Hey mom, I was thinking of this." And she's like, "Well, why don't you make it like that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good one."
precisely. That's what we both have.
Yeah, it's lovely. I have to do the follow-up, of course, because we come up with great ideas and then I'm like, yeah, I'll get on that. And then another project comes along. Um, so no proper book launch because you were like feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the marketing aspect.
That too, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. So how are you doing now with all of this? Are you still feeling?
So the good thing is, the books are not so many years out in the market. So I can still say, hey, it's the first anniversary since publication, let's celebrate, let's do this, and then kind of, build up. So there's still a chance to kind of rectify that.
Yeah. And I saw one of your, I think I saw like a reel or something on Instagram where you were like,
oh yeah, the pointing one. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I was like, yay, good for her. So yeah, I think that what I've been discovering along this journey with talking to everybody is marketing seems to be the big one where people are like, I don't know what to do. Some people study like fellow authors on TikTok and try to imitate what works and what, and avoid what doesn't work. Others stick to Instagram, some use ads. One woman I just spoke with earlier, she called like a bunch of local and I think in her state newsrooms, or she didn't call them, maybe she emailed them. And so she got on the news, like just because she was like, what do I have to lose? Right? Like my time,
Okay.
no big deal. Yeah. So off she went and she did a whole bunch of interviews and it's like, it's so smart. So I think you find your rhythm eventually. I don't think there's any magic.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just whatever, but it is a tough one. But as you get more reviews and people talk more about it, I think that is so helpful, right?
Yeah.
And you are on Instagram, which I saw. I just said like you did that. The point I should link that there. I'm gonna make a note. Link to Instagram. And did you do a book tour? Is that like
yeah? So there are a couple. There's one pretty prominent indie author book promo group, Katie Brea something. So they do book tours for indie authors. So I've used them for Tree Fairy, and then they're in the middle of getting that done for Sundirt right now. I'll probably eventually use them for the other two books as well. And yeah, it just helps generate hype.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so where did you find them?
Instagram? I don't know.
Good old Instagram. What would we do without it now?
I do not have the bandwidth to do TikTok or Twitter or Facebook either. I am on Facebook for my friends, my own friends and family, but then I think just one channel to properly focus on is good enough.
Yeah. And like you have a lot on your plate too, right? Like you've got a whole career and a home life and everything. And so at points you're gonna have to decide like, okay, well, I can take this much time away, but you don't want to spend all your time away from your life. by doing this. So
and you know, my husband, you know, when I started, when I started, you know, when I restarted my writing journey and wanting to publish, I really struggled with it. There was a part of me that was like, you know, I don't need to do this, but then I want to. Why? And I really struggled with it. And then at one point, my husband came along and just said, you know, you do what you want, but make sure you have fun. If you stop having fun, then it doesn't make sense to keep going. So that is a very valuable piece of advice. I just apply myself to everything related to the writing and my publishing journey that I'm doing. If the social media stops being fun, then I know I've gone overboard.
I love his advice. That is so fantastic, because people do forget that, you know, this is supposed to be fun, right? I mean, some people are in a very stressful position where they've you know, put all their ducks in a row. No, what is he? All their eggs in one basket. You know, all these outdated expressions. The kids are probably watching this going, what? Like, what are you talking about? But some people absolutely, you know, need this as a source of income. And others, yeah, like it should be fun. It should be looked at as another achievement in life, right? Not everybody can finish. First of all, not everybody can finish a book. I am here to tell you that. Secondly, not everybody has enough confidence to put that book out to be read by others. So right there, like win-win. And everything else is sort of gravy. And like here, I'm talking as if I know what I'm talking about.
I'm sure you do.
Well, I mean, I definitely love this. You have to have fun, because that's sort of how I live my life. Like if it's not fun.
And yes, you're right. It doesn't apply to everybody, because some people ghostwrite for a living, some people write for a living, and it's not me. It's not what I've chosen, or it's not where life has brought me. And I'm okay with that. So that's where my husband's advice still comes in handy, which is just, it's a hobby. It's a side hustle. It could be like a second career, but you know, if you're not having fun, then you lose why you enjoy writing in the first place.
And it's very, very true, because like as a career writer, when I was writing professionally for a corporation and then for the public service, it does become a bit of a chore, and you do lose the magic after a while. And I don't want to say that like I lost my love for it, but it did go away for a long time. And it took a long time for me to even want to string two words together, even attempt to do anything. Because when you do it every day, day in, day out, and you're going through the process, and you have one project on the go, one's out for translation, because I live in a country where everything has to be translated into French if you write it in English and reverse. So there was all these processes that were attached to all of it, right? And the million rounds of edits and everybody, anyway, it was just a lot. And so that can really drive the joy out of anything, because then it's a grind, and then it's like, put this down and start this right now. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm on it. And so, yeah, so it's not everybody can enjoy the writing when you do it in a professional corporate capacity. I'm sure ghostwriters probably have a little bit more fun. I should actually get a ghostwriter on to talk to them about that, because I've never thought about the different projects that I'm sure they have horrible projects.
I am very curious about ghostwriters. I mean, all my life I've known about them, and I've always felt that it never sat well with me. But then I've made a couple of friends on Instagram who are ghostwriters, and I'm always curious, like, why they do it, and are they okay with the fact that, you know, they don't get credit. And, you know, I respect them for what they do, because this is their livelihood. This is where they get their income from. It's just not something that I would ever do.
Yeah. You know what? If there are any ghostwriters out there, please connect with me, because I'd love to hear about that and what it's like to be a ghostwriter. Because I'm assuming some projects are probably wonderful, right? Very fulfilling and lovely and a good time. But then if you get a nightmare client or a topic that you're like, oh my God, like I can't imagine having to write about plumbing fixtures. Like, right? I'd be like, I don't want this job anymore. So that would be interesting to find a ghostwriter. Okay, I've made a note of that too. Unfortunately, in Singapore, you said there is a small creative scene, right? I know there's a huge food scene. Like people talk about Singapore plus food, and that's the big thing. But in terms of creativity, there's not a lot of face-to-face that you can have, right?
Yeah, there isn't. I mean, like people in the scene would say that no, there is. But I think I don't fit very well in it. Because I'm not someone who performs on stage. I don't write literature that's based on Singapore culture or even Southeast Asian culture. Although that being said, I have a sequel series to this Land of the Sun, and then I do try and bring in my home culture inside. There's a hidden kingdom somewhere in this realm that feels like Singapore. But it's not
good. That's exciting.
Yeah, but but I'm not like the people that I know of who are active in the local creative scene, and I didn't feel that I fit in very well here, which is why I have not bothered telling much people about what I do here. And my followers, Instagram friends are mostly from the US, where I feel there's a better match.
Yeah, that's well, hopefully you can change that, right? Maybe, who knows? Because prior to, who's the guy that wrote Crazy Rich Asians?
Kevin Kwan. Yeah. So I think he succeeded so well because he was not talking about an aspect of local culture that other Singaporean writers were writing about, and that the government was really interested in. He was talking about rich people, and why locally, why would you care about rich people? But it's kind of the reason why Downton Abbey was so successful outside of the UK, because rich people, lords and ladies in the UK, but then people within the UK were like, why would I want to? Yeah. So I think it's the same thing that happened, because Kevin Kwan wrote about an aspect of society that is very outrageous, that people outside the country don't really know about. And he highlighted that, and people picked up on that internationally. And it's only after he became so popular and they wanted to make a movie out of it, then the government was like, oh yeah, let's, woohoo. And I'm like, oh, come on. You wouldn't have given him the time of day here. Right?
But I think that was a lot of North America. At least I can only speak for myself and maybe a couple others, but I think that was the first time a North American audience had been introduced to Singapore. I mean, I had family that lived in Singapore, so I wanted to go. I never got a chance to go, which I still am so upset about. But having had them like tell me what life was like this was the first kind of, oh wow, Singapore, right? Have it on your radar kind of thing as a reader. And I was going somewhere with a point that sometimes you have to find your audience outside of your home to then be brought back home, which is what you essentially said yourself. Yes. So you made my point. Thank you. So that's what I'm saying. Like maybe, when, not if, your book becomes big and made into a series, because it is very cinematic. That's the thing. It's very big, and because it's a world, right? So it's not this confined, very localized sort of story that takes place within a bubble. Like I feel like it's a worldly sort of thing. So when you get your TV deal, then people in Singapore will be like, oh yeah, of course, we're like BFFs. Like, and you're like, no, we were never. Get out of here. But okay, so you don't have the face-to-face, like you haven't connected in your own hometown, but you found a great community online, which I think is so important. So where do you sort of hang out, or where do you find your people? Instagram?
Well, okay, again, it's Instagram limited, because that's pretty much the only platform that I'm really active on. Of course, on Facebook, I accidentally stumbled on the Moms Who Writes group, and that's how I connected with you. That one's been very helpful, just to recognize that there are a lot of moms who write. And it's so nice to know that they have the same struggles. I'm pregnant, I can't write, breastfeeding, babies waking up, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm there for you, sister.
Yeah. But then on Instagram, what's been really special about that is connecting with other writers who are not moms, who are in very different stages of life, and just realizing that we have the same struggles, we have the same enjoyment and frustrations. So that one's been really, really, really good. And the other day, actually, and then also realizing that there are other people who have a lot in common with me. We are writers, we're also in mental health. And that's what we did the other day with that. Like the four of us got together and we did we wanted to do an IG live, but then we ended up doing a Google Meets because IG live wouldn't support 5 of us. So someone's doing the editing of that recorded video to put it up somewhere eventually. But that was so fun to be able to talk to a bunch of other mental health professionals about their job and how it relates to writing.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to see that. I love stuff like this, like just learning about, because it's true, like different parts of different professions can marry so well with writing, right? Like either you find a lot of good characters along the way. And okay, let's think about the doctor who wrote the New Amsterdam book, right? That's now been made into a series. I don't know if you've read. I read it's a series out on TV. I don't know, like you could probably catch it somewhere. I can't remember. I think it was on Netflix for a while. But a doctor who had worked in New York and the different characters and situations he had found himself in. And it was a really great book. And then obviously it was good enough that it was picked up and made into a TV series. So, and someone else I was just speaking with about lawyers and how many lawyers turn into writers because you have this sort of all these conflicts and different sort of situations that open up before you. And obviously as a doctor, you can't you can't reveal certain things about your patients, but you can certainly think about, oh, that's an interesting scenario and what if, and then it's a way to spark creativity, right?
That's why I tell people I enjoy my job. Part of it is because I meet so many people from different walks of life. And yes, I am not allowed to plagiarize their story, but I capture the emotions because it's completely feasible to write about someone in a fantasy world who's lost their livelihood because of war and the consequence of that, but it could just as easily have been the result of me talking to a patient about losing their job and the emotional consequence of that. But that's what I pick up on, the emotions that they go through.
Yeah. And do you think that it would be sort of a way to decompress too? I guess because as a psychiatrist, you must carry a lot with you, right? I can't imagine that you're unaffected. Just like, let's say if you were a defense attorney and you have someone who's committed a horrible crime and you may not necessarily like the person or agree with what they did at all, but you are responsible for whatever. So would you ever suggest that writing can be a way to, like I said, decompress or work things out or something along those lines? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's certainly important for someone like me. I would say that as a psychiatrist, I don't really. I can see how my writing helps me to kind of process and capture what I see, but I don't necessarily use it to decompress from my job. It's more to decompress from my life in general. Yeah. But that being said, I recognize that writing for myself has been very cathartic to kind of delve into past experiences, things that I grew up with. Not that I had a bad childhood, but each of us grows up with a bit of baggage, and being able to write about that is very healthy. And my first book, Sundered, that it actually reflects a lot of that, because if you ever finish it, a lot of it is about family and figuring out how to navigate family members who are different and and trying to sort out the dynamics between everybody, and knowing that families are just imperfect. Even if you have a quote unquote happy ending, there's always something that, you know, will never be quite resolved, because that's just the dynamic of people.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good, regardless of what genre it falls into, I think that's such a good tale to tell, because it's so relatable. And people can identify that, even if it's in a fantasy novel, you can see, oh yeah, I have a dysfunctional X, Y, or Z that is quite like this character, and I can relate to the struggles that it creates. And like you said, everybody has somebody in their family that is either, you know, they are too serious or too hard, or that have some sort of issue that can't be resolved amongst the rest of the family. And and it's what makes life colorful, and you try to learn from it. I always try to find a silver lining. Sometimes it's very difficult, but
you try.
Yeah, you just got to keep moving forward, right? So you did attend 2 creative writing courses. And what did you get out of them? Because I know I love taking courses, but what did you love about them, or hate, or how did you feel at the end?
Okay, granted, this was a very long time ago. Again, this was in college. I haven't had time to attend creative writing courses. I can tell you all about the other types of medical courses I've attended. It was important for me in the sense that I got a few tips that still stick with me even today. And I still have my notes. They're kind of old and musty, but I remember, you know, you have to write like short 2-3 page things from prompts, and looking through it, it's not great, but you're like, oh, okay, within a weekend, within an 8-hour deadline, you can produce something. So it kind of gave me the confidence that, okay, I think at some level I know what I'm doing. I may not be, you know, where I want to be, but I'm somewhere.
Yeah, and someone was saying, I was watching a writer on YouTube, maybe it was one of the writing courses I took, that is like, use those prompts, use exercises, because the more you practice, the better you get, right? In try to create a habit. I mean, do I do any of this? No, but I like to pretend I do a lot of writing in my mind that gets out on the piece of paper. So I'm constantly lying, usually at night in bed, thinking, this is when I do my prompts. So I'll think, oh yeah, that was interesting what I watched today. Wouldn't it be fun if this, oh wait, now I've got a character, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like setting the scene and writing some dialogue, but I'm like, oh, I'll remember in the morning. And then I either don't, or I'm late. So I have to, and it never gets down on paper. So don't, kids,
actually,
don't do what
this happened to me just last night. I'm actually gonna do a post about it this week too. I'm editing a couple of manuscripts right now, and I'm deeply editing one of them, a prequel to the trilogy. And I was struggling with a character's backstory for the past 1 year, and kind of pushed it aside, like, you know, never mind that, you know, let's see if we can ignore it and just not bother. But then the past week has been, you know, something's not quite right. If I don't put down his backstory, it will not explain why he is behaving in this manner. And the backstory just refused to come until yesterday morning, when I was sitting in church, and there was a bit of a glimmer, a bit of a trickle. And then last night, just before going to bed, while lying in bed in the dark, my creative brain was like, here's the rest of it. Take it. I'm like, I'm trying to sleep, you know.
I am laughing because that is my every night almost, where things get worked out. Is it something to do with the quietude of the evening, that you're winding down, you're starting to relax, and your brain is sort of just processing what, you know, it delivers these gems? Because it seems like a common thing. Like, if I've forgotten, because I'm at that age where I'm forgetting everything. So, which I hope is not cognitive issues, but let's say I've been talking to somebody and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's name. Yeah. And then you can't place it, right? Everyone's had that experience. And it's always in the dead of the night that I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, it was Charlie Brown. I was talking about Charlie Brown. And so it seems that something with the dead of night, like, just delivers these things to you. Yeah. It's so interesting. But so you signed on a local editor for your line editing and some developmental editing. And so how did that work out? Did you enjoy the experience? Did you get a lot out of it?
I did. The nice thing was she's a fellow Singaporean. She's not based here. She's based somewhere else. But it feels comforting to be able to work with someone who understands where you're coming from. And you were talking about lawyers. She's a lawyer by training. Yeah, so something about them. It was a very good experience because even though I haven't done a creative writing course in so long, that few months, I think it was 8 months of working with her, felt like a creative writing course. She pointed out things that I hadn't really thought about. And because she did a little bit of developmental edits as well, she was able to say things like, this doesn't feel as strong as the way you did it previously, or this part is just too wordy. Yeah, things that me as a newbie writer, a couple of years ago wouldn't have realized. And I feel that has shot my writing up to a standard that it's never been before. Well, again, I'm not tooting my horn. Am I great? I don't think I'm great, but am I better than I was a year before? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I am.
That's fantastic. And it is so rewarding to work with someone who is as dedicated to your story as you are, right? And
dedicated, but don't hold back too. She's like, no, I don't like this. Yeah, no.
Yeah, you need that. You need that. Yeah. And it can only make you better because you're like, okay, well, it didn't work here. That doesn't mean it's not always going to work, but it's then you can kind of develop a discerning eye as well and say, I don't know, like if I should put this in this time. And it does make a huge difference because I know when I've had, well, just critique partners or in writing groups where we've shared and people have given their feedback, I always like in the beginning, it would sort of hurt because I was like, I'm perfect. I don't understand what you're all saying. And then I was like, no, that's ridiculous because clearly I can see what they're talking about after I got over myself. And I'm like, okay, come on now. And it makes you stronger because you take those things in and you're like, okay, absolutely, you're right. Like if it's word choice, you use the same word that you have to vary it up a little bit or whatever. Yeah. It's so, it can be so helpful. And I'm glad that you had a really positive experience. Oh, and we did talk about that it applied knowledge to new projects. So it's good. Would you use that same person for your future projects?
And by now she knows my writing and it makes sense to go for future projects. She's just a bit out of my budget.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yeah. That's hard. And let's talk about that because you have to decide, like I think what some people who are just writing and they're like, okay, I'm thinking about self-publishing. They don't realize that to get the best product, sometimes you have to put money into it. Right. A lot of people that I've talked to haven't put money into it and they're aware. They're like, yeah, I know I haven't. And I'm not hurting for it. Like this is within my expectation, the feedback I've received. And others are like 100%. You always have to budget for an editor or a book cover, whatever they decide. But I think if you want to produce like a good finished product to the world, that it might make sense if you can't afford it to budget something. So, but then, like you said, you have to find someone you can work with within your budget because everybody wants, I don't know, the top-notch editor out there, but they're going to charge top-notch prices. And
which is why I mean, when I restarted this and I started working with this editor, I would say that I wasn't very good at self-editing myself because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. But then now I'm actually seriously doing self-editing and I picked up so much, like even something that I wrote a year ago, I'm like, just change that, reword that, and then add that in, take that out. I'm a bit more like I can kill my words, and I can put new stuff in, I can rearrange stuff, and I feel a lot more okay with it than I was a year ago. So my hope is that I can self-edit it to as polished as possible. And, if I don't go with this editor, at least find someone who will do a good job of bringing it up to speed without, too many dollar signs.
Yeah. A couple people I talked to, they have done their own edits, then they've handed it off to, I guess they would have handed it off to like
beta readers, right?
Yeah, beta readers. I think that there was somebody else in the process before, but anyway, to the beta readers for like a developmental sort of discussion.
Yeah.
Then brought it back, redid like a self-edit, ran it through a couple different of the softwares that are available to catch, and then handed it off to somebody just so that they could save money, time, all of that stuff, right? And they found that was sort of a successful solution. Again, who am I to say what's successful or not? Because I haven't even gotten to the editing phase. So, but all of this is excellent advice, right? Like budget, make sure you have a little bit set aside for the end, for like to get a nicely polished piece. And I mean, even the prose, you still find mistakes all over.
Yeah. I was just reading I don't know what I was reading, a book that's been published 10 years ago. And then I found a sentence. There were two periods right next to each other. I was like, oh.
You're like, aha. Sometimes that makes me feel good. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, thank God. Even professional people make mistakes. Like it takes the pressure off of me as a hopeful wannabe that, okay, good. It's even in the big names, because somebody is ultimately like humans. Humans are touching this thing. So it's going to have a mistake somewhere along the line.
So that being said, let me add, the prequel that I'm working on right now, I am also mulling over whether to submit it to like a small publisher. So if that does happen, and if I do get accepted, that would save a lot of cost. But at the same time, the reason why I'm doing the self-edits to begin with is just to make it as polished and presentable as possible.
Well, that's so exciting. That's so exciting for you
Well, I'm mulling it. I'm not sure if I'll go with it.
Yeah, but it's still like that's a good goal. Why not? Right. And you have 3 under your belt. And there have been huge success stories where people have self-published in the beginning, and then they publishers like, oh yeah, and then they pick up their backlist, right? Because they're like, well, this was great. So I one person who did it, his name is Christopher Paolini, I want to say his last name is.
The Aragon
guy? Yes. And he was a teenager. He was a very young person when he wrote that first book. And and he self-published. Because I'll never forget reading the story. And he was a huge, I'm older than him, I think. I think I am. Yeah, because I was an adult already when I was reading the book. And so I was like, oh my God, this young man did this. And then later, publishing company picked it up and picked up his original self-published one, and then I think he's got 3 or 4 out in the series. I don't know what else he's done.
Lot. There's a lot. I mean, like they're in his books are in that age group where I do look at it in the library database just to see whether it's suitable for my kids, and I see a lot like Aragon, everything. And I'm like, how did this guy do it?
Yeah, if you get the chance to read it, have you read it?
No.
It's really great. It's really great.
Pretty sure he used ghostwriters.
Yeah. Now let me think about that. Maybe I should use a ghostwriter to get famous, and then they're like, her second book is a dud. Imagine. It happens. So fingers crossed for you, because that would be awesome. I mean, there are people who have made their weight in gold as a self-published author, right? If that's your goal, is to make money, and people have been very successful, and they've turned away offers because they want to retain their independence or whatever. But I also think it's super exciting because it's on a different level. Then you can speak from both angles, right? Like you've done it yourself and you've worked with a publisher, whether it be small press or big traditional. But I'm so excited about that. If you go ahead with it, I don't want to jinx anything, but that's exciting news. I think that's great news. So it's interesting because you, like myself, you also write, well, you're the editor of your newsletter, like the medical newsletter, right? So, and I kind of talked about me with the getting drained emotionally, but you just had a really successful project with your team, or you contributed to it, and it was really, I was really impressed by it. So please tell the world about that. What you did.
Yeah, so I can send you a picture of that one too. So basically, I'm so clueless, right? I've been volunteering in this position on the editorial board for 5 or 6 years, and then sometime during COVID was when I got promoted into the position of editor, and I really didn't know what it meant other than what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is, accept or reject publications or contributions, or tell contributors why I think they could make it better. And I have a whole team, well, okay, not a whole team, 2 people working with me to do all of this, right? And I didn't even really know what the term was until one time I saw a post about someone describing the different types of editors. And most people focus on things like line editing, copy editing, developmental editing, but that particular post had this last one, acquisitions. And I realized that on my very own small time basis, that's what I do. I see what fits, and I think about our readers, and then I take or I source for other people to contribute based on what I think the readers want.
That's so great.
Yeah, so that's that. And then what happened earlier this year, sometime in the summer, was that a local artist who was making a lot of drawings and putting it on Facebook to support healthcare workers approached us and said, would you like to use my drawings, the 40 or so that I've published over the past 2 years, well, not published, but posted in the past 2 years on social media, would you like to compile it into a book? And we kind of, put your name, put our name on it and sell it for charity. And we did it. We have very short timeline from the summer all the way till October before it went to print. And we were going to launch it in November, and we managed to do it. And yeah, it's on sale now in Singapore. It's not internationally available, even though there have been people who did ask me, can we send it to them? But we're not going that big, but it's been good to be able to do that. And it was so interesting because if I hadn't done my self-publishing journey last year, I wouldn't have known what I was doing this year. But during that initial meeting with the artists, I was just going, I was like, book launch, venue, ISBN, proofreader, editor, graphic size, pages, glossy map, blah, 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 blah. And I could say and do all of these things because I went through this last year already. So it made me sound like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. But it's a whole skill. Like you learn so many things when you self-publish, right? Like you learn a whole bunch of things you would never normally learn. So everybody was probably like, whoa, she knows what she's talking about.
No, and the funny thing is my team was present. So they know about all these things because that's what they do for their job. The other guy who was present, for some reason, also knew what he was talking about, even though he hasn't done any of this. I think he helped someone with another book. And then there was the artist. And if I hadn't done if the meeting had been held 1 year earlier, I would be the one sitting there looking like
be like, yeah, that sounds good. No, but I did see, I guess, a couple pages out of it. It must have been on your Facebook or when I was researching you, I can't remember. And I just thought, oh, this is such a lovely initiative. And it just was such a feel-good piece that the world sort of needed.
Yeah, I think a lot of so what we did was we got each comic that the artist drew, we got a doctor or a nurse or a other healthcare professional to kind of look at the piece and reflect on it and write something, whether it's a sentence or a poem. Someone wrote a poem, or like half an essay, and we got really nice pieces from that, and it kind of felt like I used the word earlier, cathartic for the contributors.
Yeah, because you guys like come out of a really intense period. I mean, worldwide, there hasn't been, I don't think, a single healthcare provider on any like point of the spectrum of healthcare providers, like from the phlebotomist all the way up to, you know, the brain surgeon. There's been a lot of stress.
We were all affected in different ways.
Yeah. And like I want to do a shout out to a couple that I know, because there's a nurse that so I haven't really revealed on the program before, but I have inflammatory bowel disease, right? So I'm lucky in a way that I am in Toronto, and I'm part of this hospital that specializes in this condition. And so there are a number of nurses who have been really instrumental in helping guide the way. And so one of them, Brenda, she went from being basically, she was, you know, doing a lot of research and things like that, to going into the front lines, and she was doing testing and all sorts of things. And for 2 years, right? And this was, she had gotten out of the practical end of nursing and into more of the, you know, like the brain work as opposed to the actual face-to-face. And you know, she'd post all the time and show things. And so she brought it to life for me, the struggle that all of you guys were having too. And so thank you for, you know, being you and helping the world come back to a normal place, especially in your specialty, because now there's so much upset and mental health crises. I mean, I see it all the time in our city right now. Everyone's kind of on the verge of either some sort of a breakdown, having a really hard time, or unfortunately there's been a lot of violence. And I think there's been a lot of violence all over the world because people have, you know, are coming out.
Yes, I mean, Singapore is not a violent country per se, but you can see it's coming out in different ways. It could be like a lot of impatient people throwing things.
Yeah, just even rage.
Things like that.
Yeah. Or even in the stores, like people have no patience anymore with each other. Canada used to be known as a very friendly place. And all of a sudden it's like at the grocery store, sometimes people are like getting into fights. And I'm like, I've never seen such a thing. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. It sounds like we're just out brawling each other in the streets, but it's not. But I mean, things are happening. So thank you for being there to help us navigate our way back into some semblance of a normal existence. So
welcome. Well, I'm very excited to share a cover of that book with you. That one was special because we did that in such a short time. And I remember my 2-man team went down to 1 man just before that first meeting. And I had no idea how she was going to do it, but she did it. So a lot of thanks goes to her, actually. I was just the one coordinating everything on my side.
Well, yeah, no, that was a special project. And you see, who would have thought that, you know, I mean, well, you would have thought it because you were already writing back in college, but like that you would have ended up here having just published your own books, and then this catastrophe happens in the world, and then you have an opportunity to work on this wonderful project. So yay all around. It's like it all fell into place for you. So this new prequel, are you anywhere sort of like have a date of when it may be complete, or are you not putting that kind of pressure on yourself?
So I'm going to aim to finish the self-edits by the end of this month, which, you know, some people think it's crazy because it's the festive month, but I already told myself to do that. And then I probably will try to submit it to that small publisher, and they have a 6 months turnaround time or response time. And if beyond that 6 months I don't hear from them, or if I email them and they ignore me, and then that's when I'm going to proceed to launch. So whatever it is, second half of next year, that will be something will come up in.
Yeah. So, and do you have a cover designer, or do you do your own covers?
So the previous covers were all done by people on Fiverr. And so you know, I know people say that Fiverr has a lot of issues. There are some scammers and quality is not that good. I was so fortunate that I managed to find, okay, fortunate or unfortunate, depends how you want to conclude. I had 3 different designers for all 3 covers, which was so painful. But I was fortunate that the first cover, the designer did such a good job. I really loved the cover. And when she said she couldn't do the second one, I found someone who could copy her style for a cheaper price. But
Excellent.
we went through so many rounds of corrections that I never wanted to go back with him again. And then for the third one, I just said, you know what, I'm not going to go through the problem of number 1 and 2, because number 1 was a bit fussy too. Yeah. So and then number 2 was not fussy, but couldn't just get what I wanted properly. And then number 3, I just paid a little bit more money. They struggled a little bit, but they could kind of match number 1 and 2. So which is pretty impressive. So the summary of that is, I'm not sure if I'm going to find my own designer or go back to Fiverr or try on my own. The issue with trying on my own is, I always tell my kids, I cannot draw to save my life. I can draw stick figures. You should see you should see when I had to do my maps, when I had to get someone to do my maps for me, you should see the circles and triangles that I was drawing. It's so, yeah, so it's funny because people are like, oh, you're so creative, you can draw, right?
You're like,
no. That thing is, everything I can visualize is here. It depends on my words to bring it out. I cannot depend on my drawings to bring it out.
Yeah. But what about who did your children's book then?
Oh yeah, that one was another illustrator. So again, Fiverr. I mean, for some reason, I didn't have as bad an experience with Fiverr as other people seem to have.
So that's good. That's like a good thing. I mean, try Fiverr, guys. Like, why not? Right? I guess you have to cross your fingers while you're doing it, but that gives me sort of a little bit more faith in humanity, because that's good though that you had success. Yeah, because it's hard to find
success in the sense that it was, like I said, 3 different designers for 3 different covers, which really shouldn't have happened that way. It's just, that was just what I found. On hindsight, I should have just gone with the 3rd designer from the get-go, but again, budget constraints, I didn't want to pay a little bit more, but it's I should have.
This is part of the learning. This is exactly what we're talking about, that it's a steep learning curve and you pick up this knowledge along the way. And it's like, what part, like what's more valuable to you, right? Like the dollars and cents or the amount of aggravation saved. So you have to do that sort of cost analysis and say, well, yeah, okay, I might be paying more, but I won't be driven mad by this process. And if you can, go the route of paying a little bit more and you're comfortable with that, I always am in favor of that. Like, my husband often is like, well, why don't you go to this store for this? This is his big thing, right? I saw it on sale here, so go there first and then pick this up. And I'm like, no, are you mad? Like, absolutely, I'm not doing that. Like, forget it. So I am a true believer that if it saves my sanity and any aggravation, I'm all for. How much? Okay, take my money. It's fine.
That being said, my illustrator for my children's book, I got really fortunate with her. It was like first try, and she did such a good job, and she was so professional, even though sometimes you worry certain countries where they come from, but she's next door. She's from Indonesia.
Oh, perfect.
And she's got an Instagram page too. You can see her style. Her style is so unique.
I love,
when you see her other drawings, this is her. And she was so patient with me. She would give me a black and white before colorizing it, and then she would make changes. So I got really lucky with her. Yeah, but she doesn't do fantasy drawing. She doesn't do that type of cover. So unfortunately, I couldn't even go with her if I wanted to.
But she did a beautiful job. And again, I'm going to post all the pictures that we're talking about, like all the covers that we're talking about. Somewhere it's going to just appear magically. So it probably would have already appeared earlier in the video, but I'll probably put them over my face right now. So people get a break from my face. So it just sounds like all good things. You're still writing, you've got a plan. Have you planned anything out beyond the prequel, or you're just focusing on the prequel, or are you one that has like 7 million stories on the go in your brain that
I'm one of the latter. I have so many other things. The problem is I'm just one person with 24 hours a day, and 8+ of that is needed for sleeping. So I at the same time, while I'm self-editing this prequel, I'm also editing a romance manuscript that I finished in October.
Fantastic.
So we were talking about Crazy Rich Asians, right? And I wanted to do something similar, but to focus on the fact that there's a bit more to Singapore than that, but without getting so nitty-gritty into the culture that audiences internationally might not be able to relate to it. So that one, okay, I'm an indie author, and I am wanting to go small press for my fantasy series, but this one I feel needs to go traditional. So that one is the one that I'm hoping to, while working on this prequel, query that one next year.
That's amazing. Good for you. And I'd love to have you back to hear all about all of this, because even just because this channel might be devoted to indie authors, there are indie authors out there that are going to try to go to a small press, to a traditional publisher, a larger traditional publisher, and will need advice on that process. So,
well, and it's not, and the point is not so much that just you go from indie to traditional. The point for me, at least, is the feel of the manuscript. I didn't start out this romance manuscript thinking that I was going to traditionally publish it, but as I wrote it, it kind of felt like, in order to do justice to it, it needed to be it needed to go the traditional route first. Whereas for my fantasy books, it always kind of felt that, no, I need to keep control of it.
Well, I can tell you, if you're concerned about communicating, or not getting into the nitty-gritty of Singapore culture, at least the friends that I know who we're all from Toronto, right? We all love the Korean dramas, Chinese dramas and romances. So even though we know that we're missing something, we are missing specific key cultural important things, just the stories, all of us talk about whatever one we've watched recently, and thank God for Netflix, right? It's introducing you to the world. So I don't think that you should hold back necessarily, because if there's an authentic story and there's people will look at that as something to learn, as opposed to feeling alienated by a new culture, or I wish in some ways that the dramas that I watch did have some sort of interpreter, so they could be this is a traditional thing we do,
okay,
right?
Okay.
So I could be but you kind of glean that if you watch enough. You're oh, okay, well, this is the way that, it's weird. A lot of Korean dramas, they blur out knives. If you're watching a police procedural, let's say, right? And there's a knife wielding maniac in it, it's blurred out. And we're okay, well, that must be the way that it's got to be in that culture. And I know,
I think I'll bet it's a superstition that has to do with the sharp point.
Okay. See, I don't know, but we were just amongst my friends.
I don't know. I'm guessing based on what I know. I'm guessing based on what I know. Yeah. Something about the sharp point and luck. Okay.
Well, see, but we gleaned that it was something cultural based, obviously. Why would you blur it out? We were thinking more oh, maybe it's because it's an act of violence, or it's a very violent tool. And then there was something else about in Japan, I can't remember what it was, but on YouTube, watching a lot of Japanese videos, so people crave this. They crave something new and something it's so fascinating. I think that's why Crazy Rich Asians did so well, because it was a new experience for North Americans who didn't have any contact with Singapore. The majority of the world does not live like that at all. So that was new for everybody.
Yes, majority of Singaporeans don't live like that either.
Yeah, but I'm saying all this to say, go for it, right? Because you'll get an audience regardless, and you'll get a huge following. And because you're very talented. You have a really wonderful storytelling voice, a very strong.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
So I'm excited to see what comes out next and to finish the first book. And I'm already like, I can tell you, I'm already going to love the whole trilogy. So yeah, I'm already looking forward to the prequel with only having read some of the first one. But yeah, like regardless of where this goes, I would love to have you back when you have more under your belt with the query process to share with us and with your successes, because I know
with querying, I don't know, I might be more in tears then.
Well, let's see. Let's see. I want to put all the good luck I've got towards you. There's all these good vibes coming your way for this process. And you know what? Like I said, everything's a learning experience. And so whichever way it goes, you only can come out better from it because you've gone through that experience, and you can share that if you feel up to it with others to guide them in their own journey. And that's what this channel is all about. And I'm finding that's what this community is all about, sharing ideas and helping each other. And it's really wonderful. Any parting words, just anything that we didn't cover and you'd like to impart to the world, even though I know the world's not going to be watching this, but to whoever's watching this?
I would say what other people have talked about, which is that if you wanna write a book, if you want to do something regarding writing, just sit down and do it. It's so beautiful. It's wonderful for your mental well-being, even though it doesn't feel great sometimes when you're doing it, right? We agonize over different things, but it's been a lovely journey to be able to do this, doing something that I started out in my teens, in my college days doing, and being able to come back to it. So it's been really good.
And being like a fantastic influence on your daughter, and yeah, right. And nurturing another generation of at least one writer out there who you've inspired or you've nurtured in some way. I mean, obviously in every way, she's your child, but yeah, so keep on.
It's okay. The other three, the two of them are readers already.
Okay,
the
good.
Writing will come later.
Yeah. And what about the fourth?
She's kind of small, so I don't know where she's.
So she's not. We're setting the bar too high right now for her.
She'll look at pictures.
Okay, that's the start. That's perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time. And I know big time difference, and taking time away from your daily interaction with your patients, and thank you for just all this wonderful insight that you've provided. And I'm sure a bunch of people are going to be like, oh, okay, this is perfect. This is what I needed to hear. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Bye.